All right, guys, this is a review for the reproductive anatomy quiz tomorrow. So first we're going to review male anatomy, the flow of sperm. So remember that sperm start in the testes, specifically in the seminiferous tubules. Which are going to do a process called spermatogenesis. And the sperm are then, after they're made, are going to flow into a series of tubules that sit above the testes called the epididymis. And this is where the sperm, specifically the flagella, mature and become functional. And from after that, it's going to go into the vas deferens. And at this point, it is only sperm, no semen. Semen is not sperm. It's going to pick up the semen from accessory organs that the sperm doesn't actually flow through. So, just like in the digestive system, how there were accessory organs, there are accessory glands that add semen. Remember that semen is going to be alkaline. It's going to provide the fructose for the mitochondria, and it's also going to provide a natural antibiotic to protect the fertilized ovum. So that's going to be from the seminal vesicles and the Cowper's gland. But the sperm does not directly flow through that. It's just going to contribute the semen. So from the vas deferens, it's then going to go through the prostate. And the prostate separates the urinary and reproductive tracts. So, separate the urinary and reproductive tracts. So it's going to prevent urine from getting in the semen and prevent semen from getting in the urine. From the prostate, it's then going to enter the urethra. So both semen and urine pass through the urethra, not at the same time, but they both use the urethra because in the male, the urinary and reproductive tract meet. In females, they're kept separate. It's a very important distinguishing thing. So, speaking of female and male structures, let's talk about analogous structures. So, analogous structures. So, male and female. You need to make sure that you know what the analogous structure is in males and females. Did everyone watch the 1.5-minute video, We Were All Female? Most of you did. Make sure you watch it before tomorrow. What two structures on a man's body is proof that they were once female? Nipples and the dark line on the scrotum. You don't need to know the name of it, but you need to know why that's proof that they were female. Thank you. Thanks. All right, so analogous structures. The vas deferens in males is the same thing as what in females? You got it, fallopian tubes. Good. Good. What about the prostate? The prostate was the uterus and the Skene's gland. What about the corpus cavernosum? Clitoris, good. You can remember it because they all start with C. Corpus cavernosum, clitoris. What about the scrotum? The labia majora. Let's see. What am I? Oh, testes. It's pretty obvious. It looks just like testes, but they haven't descended. Ovaries. And a sneaky one. Urethra would be analogous to the urethra. Yeah. Urethra. Also the bladder, which is not part of the reproductive system, but the bladder is the same thing in humans. The bladder stores urine. It does not play a role in the reproductive system at all. It's actually in the urinary system. Okay. Let's see. The tissues in the penis. So there's two, and you need to know which one is rigid, becomes rigid, and which one remains pliable. Corpus spongiosum. The cavernosum becomes rigid when it fills with blood. The spongiosum remains pliable. Make sure you know the difference between that. Then in females, there is the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is what the follicle in the ovary turns into. So it came from the follicle, and after ovulation, after the egg is released, the follicle turns into the corpus luteum, and you need to know that it begins to make a hormone called progesterone. And it is in the ovary, of course. So the ovary, the follicle, and some of the cells in the ovary make estrogen. The corpus luteum makes progesterone. And this is actually a good point for us to start going into the female. Let's see, anything else from the male? Any questions on male anatomy? Okay, let's go into female. Flow of an oocyte or ovum. All right, so it's going to start. It is produced before the female is even born. She is born with all the eggs that she will have, and they are produced and stored in the ovary. So the ovary is the female follicle, right? And it is the site of oogenesis. Spermatogenesis makes sperm. Oogenesis makes the egg or ovum. It also produces and makes estrogen. Okay, so the ovary makes estrogen. The corpus luteum makes progesterone. The corpus luteum is in the ovary, but you need to know specifically what part is making the progesterone and what part is making the estrogen. All right, so from the ovary, when the egg is released from the ovary, it's called ovulation. And I encourage you to watch a video, find a video on YouTube showing ovulation. I have one I'll play for you, but I encourage you to find your own just to see how that happens and see all the structures and how they work. So from the ovary, egg is released in ovulation. We're going to learn all about ovulation next week and what hormones are managing it and regulating it. From the ovary, it is not going to go into the fallopian tube directly. Technically, it goes into the space between the ovary and the fallopian tube, which is the abdominal cavity. So there are some very rare medical occurrences where the egg incorrectly goes into the abdominal cavity and it gets fertilized and it attaches in the abdominal cavity. It's called an ectopic pregnancy. We'll learn about that in 2 weeks. And it's usually, if it's caught early, sometimes they can save the mother, but usually, unfortunately, it can be really bad and harmful and potentially even fatal for the mother. So it passes very temporarily through the abdominal cavity, and then it is swept up by these finger-like projections called fimbriae. They are fringe-like or finger-like projections at the end of the fallopian tube. That sweep the ovum into the fallopian tube. Not only do they have these finger-like projections that sweep it, they also are lined with cilia that are also sweeping it. So it's going to sweep the egg into the fallopian tube. And that is where fertilization occurs. If an egg is not fertilized, it only lives for about 12 to 24 hours. It does not live long. So the rest of the path through the fallopian tube, it would no longer be alive. And we're going to talk about how it is shed with the lining of the uterus next week. We're going to talk about ovulation and menstruation. So from the fallopian tube to the uterus, and then out the vagina. The uterus is not connected to the urethra. They are completely separate in females. The bladder is connected to the urethra, and the uterus is connected to the vagina. They're completely separate systems. Women do not urinate out their vagina. They urinate out their urethra, which is separate from the vagina. Also, you need to know the vagina is an internal structure. A lot of times students come into the class thinking that everything between the legs, between a woman's legs, is the vagina. That's the only term they know. You need to know the difference between the internal structures and the external structures. What are the external structures of the female reproductive tract called? I know. It's funny because people know the male reproductive tract, they know those structures, but it's like when we get to female reproduction structures, there's such a lack of education and understanding about it. None of you know what the external structures of the female reproductive tract are? Isn't that interesting? You know the male structures. Why don't we know the female structures? You know? So, vagina is internal. External is called the vulva. And the vulva is made of 3 things. Please don't say vagina. Please don't say vagina. The vagina is not external. What are the three external structures that comprise the vulva? The what? The labia is good. And then one more? What do you think? You got it, the clitoris. The vulva is made up of the clitoris, the labia majora, which is the larger outer one, and the labia minora. Definitely know the difference between external structures and internal structures of the female reproductive tract. Also know the vagina and the penis are kept acidic, remember? And that's to prevent contamination, microbe growth. And it's also why semen has a alkaline chemicals, compounds in it to protect it from the acidic penis and vagina. All right, let's go into the layers of the uterus. There is an outer layer, a thick muscular layer that all of us girls love so much because when it contracts, we get cramps. Oops.